Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. It is Friday the 13th, 2015, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here are tonight's top stories.
Tonight, new FCC rules are designed to ruin political speech. Then, the law that would make it illegal to film police. And how holding a door open is now considered sexist. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Yeah, if you're chopping women's genitals off and torturing them, selling them into rape slave gangs, that's trendy and liberal because it's a foreign culture.
Well, the FCC finally made public the details of the so-called net neutrality rules that were approved 2 weeks ago. And as we've stated, the internet is already free and open, so this amounts to little more than a power grab. Now, you can view a PDF of the full 400-page document online. We've pulled out a few of the things for you here. On its face, it seems like some of these things like no throttling and no blocking, these are good. They're valuable to the public interest. But then you start seeing words like enforcement, required, it must be, and legal authority, and they're creating a whole organization to come and enforce these rules. So, of course, this spells out government micromanagement. But of course, this document doesn't protect people who are downloading copyrighted material. So in that sense, they're still leaving the door open to be able to throttle services. They say they're rendering it effectively, if not technically useless. So they're kind of skirting around their own rules there. It will also give government authorities the ability to censor their political enemies and limit their use of the internet. Now, you'll recall we reported last year on an FCC study. They were going around to newsrooms and doing a poll, basically, of journalists, having them take this test, talking about their news philosophy and how do they pick out the stories, how do they choose the certain stories that they decide to air. And it was an obvious underhanded attempt to revive the fairness doctrine. And of course, we've already heard rumblings of making sure you're being fair with the ads that you put on your website. All of this stuff was forewarned about by one of the FCC's very own commissioners, Ajit Pai. He said, the internet has become a powerful force for freedom, both at home and abroad. So it's sad to witness the FCC's unprecedented attempt to replace that freedom with government control. So this was coming out, in the days leading up to this ruling taking place. He was warning everyone that, this is not net neutrality. This is government micromanagement, and that's what we're going to be seeing more of. Now, we'll report more on these FCC rules in depth as we go through the 400 pages, but something that we did notice right away and we found very interesting was that you'll find in the footnotes, it'll say something like Google's opinion, eBay's opinion, even companies like Etsy, who aren't even that big yet, all giving opinions to this FCC report. So kind of curious when all that was taking place, and it's also just kind of revealing once again that there is no transparency within Congress, no transparency with the public, but here they have corporations, internet corporations being able to get in on the negotiations here with the FCC. So that is very troubling. Now, something else coming out of Texas. This is a new bill that's being introduced, and they're trying to make it illegal to film police. Now, this is House Bill 2918. It was introduced by Texas Rep. Jason Villalba on Tuesday. He wants to make that offense a misdemeanor if you are a private citizen recording police within 25 feet. And citizens who are armed would have to be 100 feet away. Now, here, this bill, he's trying to say only representatives of radio or TV organizations that hold an FCC license and also newspapers and magazines, these are the only people that are going to have the right to record police. Now, the legislator, he went on Twitter and he wanted to make it clear he doesn't want to make the filming of cops illegal. He just wants people to back up a little bit. So obviously, if you're a person who's being pulled over by an officer, you're going to be a little too close to be recording them, according to this bill. If you're a person who has concealed carry, you have your gun in your car and you're being pulled over and you want to record that altercation, there you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor. So this is obviously, going against the First Amendment. And I'm sorry, but news organizations, radio, television, they're not going to get to the destination, to the scene of the crime in time to record any kind of experience that you're having with police officers. So this is a terrible bill. Hopefully it'll get shut down. It's, going against the First Amendment, and he's trying to skirt around it and say, oh, well, I don't mean no filming at all. I just mean back up a little bit. And that's just, it's not going to work. You'll see in this next video, it was the filming of the police officer that caused the cop to back off and not arrest this woman's pit bull.
So am I under arrest?
No, your dog is, though.
My dog's under arrest. For what?
Dog could be for a vicious and large dog.
She's not vicious, and she's not at large. My dog has not stepped out of my vehicle. You cannot take my dog. She has not done anything to anybody. She has not attacked anybody. She has not bit anybody. Just because somebody was scared to get in their car, you cannot take my dog. My dog has done nothing.
So now not only do we have to deal with states like Mississippi wanting to give police the authority to enter your home without a warrant and shoot your dog if it's not caged up, but now we have police officers who are threatening to arrest people's pit bulls who are in their car. And he had no authority to do that. That's why he walked away. The dog did not even exit the vehicle, and this woman stood her ground and recorded the entire altercation. So that's why it is important to film the police. You need that. You got to be able to use that in a court of law. Now, after the shooting of 2 police officers in Ferguson this week, we saw a really heartfelt tweet coming from the president. Thing that upsets me with this tweet is that it wasn't a press conference. He didn't, have the press meet him in the Rose Garden to talk about how wrong it is to be killing police officers in retaliation. But then he goes on to the Jimmy Kimmel show there, and he gives a really lengthy speech to the legitimacy of the protesters. So he issues this tweet when it comes to saying, oh, killing cops is bad. But then he goes and he talks for a while on Jimmy Kimmel about the legitimacy of the protests. Now, in this case, I do not disagree with the president. The protesters do have a legitimate reason to be out there protesting. We've seen some really good things coming out of those protests. And like the protesters say, that didn't come from them. They had nothing to do with it. So because some crazy person decides to shoot at cops doesn't mean now we just need to shut it down and people shouldn't have the right to protest. But this is also what the president said after all the rioting and looting. He came on television and said that the grievances of these rioters and looters was legitimate and understandable. So once again, the president is not condemning this action. He's basically being like Method Man of the Wu-Tang Clan, who went on MSNBC this week to say that the police officers who were shot in Ferguson this week brought it on themselves. He said, you reap what you sow, adding that a recent FBI report that highlighted these abuses are responsible for the backlash against the police. But here again, we have both of these people using their public platforms, one being the president of the United States, who's supposed to be a leader, not stopping to fan the flames of this civil unrest, but helping to sort of foment the idea that it's us versus them, that it's protesters versus the police, citizens versus the police. It's, not coming down to stop this false narrative that is continuing with Mike Brown. He didn't have his hands up. He wasn't trying to surrender. He didn't have his back turned. And we know that as well from these documents that have been released through the Department of Justice official investigation. Now, here when Method Man says something like this, you reap what you sow. Obviously, he has a lot of followers, but that's a ridiculous argument. That's basically saying that black men deserve it or have it coming, because these police officers who were shot didn't even work for Ferguson. It was just random. They randomly killed cops. So it's the same argument that you're making, that cops are targeting black men indiscriminately. So it just doesn't even make sense. And as we've also reported, Jakari Jackson did a report on this as well, where most of the protesters have been peaceful. They've been going about this very smartly, actually, working up to get a civilian oversight committee. They've been going through the courts, doing it the right way. And then you have someone who just comes in and shoots at the police, and the president only issues a tweet condemning that action. And, obviously we do want to ensure that the police have a measure of accountability, and that, intrinsic racism in police departments is dismantled. Of course we want that. But you can't say that killing police officers in retaliation is justified. That is a ridiculous argument, and people really need to start making that distinction. Now, we've reported how some cities are doing away with their police agencies altogether and moving toward private law enforcement. But check out one city's solution to privatizing their police.
Recently, we brought you the story about the Texas town that replaced their law enforcement with private security and then saw a 61% decrease in crime. And I understand that's not a one-size-fits-all policy. You may have other sheriff's departments, other police departments that get along very well with their communities. So when I heard there was a similar story in Michigan, I was very intrigued, but also somewhat concerned. Because in Michigan, they have a private funded police department, which I think is great, but they also have it set up. If you donate enough money, you can then apply as a reserve officer, which brings up questions about how well these guys are actually trained.
Police Academy. I want to welcome all of you to
Citizens on Patrol.
Citizens on Patrol.
The Police Academy has offered to train you citizens
You just don't think I'm fast enough anymore, do you?
to better protect yourselves.
Do we get to pack heat?
Yes, ma'am, you can pack a gun. And I'll give the police department the benefit of the doubt and say that these officers are exceptionally well trained. But you still have the issue of being able to pay to play. If you have enough cash, you could potentially become a reserve officer, which has some people on edge. You know, what if somebody gets on the force that isn't exactly the moral equivalent of we want our officers to be? Because even with a regular police department, these guys undergo psychological evaluations, and you still have these rogue guys who end up on the streets. So ultimately, I do applaud the chief's ambitions, but only time will tell how well this thing works out. You can find more reports on INFOWARS.com, and hopefully they don't end up with guys like this.
This is great, man, isn't it? Me and you, security guards, out here acting like real cops.
Wait, that's my car!
You may reprocure your vehicle.
That's not security! Get out of the damn car!
Didn't your mama teach you any manners? At least you could ask me nicely.
Well, if you're following me on Twitter, you can usually get the gist of whatever it is I feel like ranting about on the news. And this is one story in particular that really caught my eye. This is coming out of HuffPost. They're reporting that chivalry is now sexist. This is according to a new study. So that's right. If you were raised to respect women and to open doors and be polite, you are a sexist. But you're a good sexist, because these are some new terms, at least to me, coming out of the study. This is out of Northeastern University in Boston. They say there are two types of sexists out there. Acts of so-called chivalry, like paying for dinner, offering up jackets, and calling a woman love or dear, can be signs of benevolent sexists. You're the good sexists. But hostile sexists are those who specifically leave housework to wives and girlfriends, or they do the wolf whistles at women who are walking down the street. So these are hostile sexists. And, you know, I guess if you leave all the housework to your children, like Joe Jennings does back in the control room, he is a passive sexist. Either way, you have a penis, you're a sexist. That's what this report boils down to. So the co-author and psychology professor Judith Hall at this Boston-based university told the Daily Mail that while some women consider the behavior of benevolent sexists to be gentlemanly and courteous, benevolent sexism is like a wolf in sheep's clothing because it perpetuates support for gender inequality. Oh my gosh, I hate what third wave feminism is doing to our country. She says, if a man is carrying out these actions because he believes a woman is fragile and thus requires protection, then he's being sexist. But if he's doing it to be kind, then that's just being polite. So I don't know. Whenever a man opens the door for me, I really doubt that he's sitting there in his mind going, oh, she's so fragile. I don't think that she can open this door all on her own. You know, I've even had it now to where men will not open the door for me. And what I actually see going through their head is, oh, I don't want her to think that I'm being a sexist, so I'm just going to let the